Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the nation, right here, TYT Nation. Happy 2018. So it is a new year. Same old show, though. So we've got a great show, actually, today. Yes, I'm still a little sick, so I have not gotten over whatever the hell it is that I'm dealing with. And yes, I am drinking plenty of tea. I've been following you guys' recommendations. It's going to be here for a little while. But nonetheless, I'm back. I'm going to do the show anyway because I have not been talking about the news in a while, and it's driving me crazy. I got a lot of stuff to talk about. I got a lot of problems with people in Congress, and now you guys are going to hear about it. So, to kind of borrow a phrase from Seinfeld. Sort of. Anyway, like I said, got a great show for you guys today. We got some interesting news on Orrin Hatch and Mitt Romney. Oh, interesting. Romney's back. Yeah, it looks like we've got a lot of 2012 coming back. Both Mitt Romney and maybe Michelle Bachmann. That's a story that we're going to have later on. We have Trump taking credit for something. What doesn't he take credit for that he didn't do? We have sort of the future on what the Republicans are looking forward to 2018. Looking forward sounds a little too positive. It's more of the stuff that they're dreading, and I'm going to get into details on one of those afterwards. We'll talk about what they plan to do on Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. That's a fascinating story. Look inside of the different factions within the Republican Party. Then we have the United States ranking on the minimum wage. That's an interesting story. So all that stuff right here today around the nation. So a lot of interesting stuff. So before I get to it, I'm going to thank the patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. I want to thank all of you here for joining me today. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Helps us get out to the masses. And Happy New Year, everybody. So, all right. So let's move on. Let's start out with the first story here. Orrin Hatch. You're going to love this. For some reason, my sidebar game is on point today. Down goes Orrin Hatch. Down goes Orrin Hatch. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got him. Utah Senator Orrin Hatch has announced earlier today that he will retire at the end of his term. Now, that, of course, ends apparently along speculation that he would not seek re-election. And look, this guy, he's been in office for a very, very long time. He's actually the longest-serving Republican senator in U.S. history. He's been in office for over 3 decades. That is a very, very long time, so this man is a fossil, and not a very good one, and apparently not a very popular one. And it turns out that he is incredibly unpopular in his state. His poll numbers in Utah indicated that 75% of these voters said they did not want Orrin Hatch to run again. Now, Hatch, of course, is a very big sort of ally to President Trump. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but within that big vacuum that Orrin Hatch is going to leave, well, here comes our old friend, Mitt Romney. And by friend, I mean the guy who called about half of America moochers. Awesome. Now, according to Business Insider, Hatch had made his announcement on Tuesday saying, quote, "Every good fighter knows when to hang up the gloves." And so it doesn't have anything to do with the Trump administration turning into a roaming dumpster fire or your poll numbers going to shit. Didn't have anything to do with that. No. Not according to him. No, he says, quote, "I may be leaving the Senate, But the next chapter in my public service is just beginning. See, I'm moving on to something bigger and better than serving the public. So that means he's going to be a lobbyist. That's what you do. That's what the revolving door allows you to do. So since he got the gigantic tax cuts passed, and that's what most of these Republicans, you have to understand, this is the dream that they've been chasing for a very, very long time, to give enormous tax cuts to the rich and corporations. And now, when they finally got it, see ya. My job, my job's over with. Mission complete. Mission accomplished. You can hang the banner now. Now I'm going to go work for those corporations that I just enriched. And I'm going to make millions of dollars. I don't have to beg for money from these corporations anymore. Now they're going to pay me. Just for going and lobbying. So that's what Orrin Hatch is going to do. Now, Hatch's announcement, according to Business Insider, comes after President Trump urged him to run again, which would have prevented former Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney from potentially filling the seat. Trump also appeared along Hatch at a Utah rally to push the Republican tax reform plan, which they did. They ended up passing, where he called on the high-ranking Republican to keep serving in the Senate. Quote, "You meet fighters and you meet people that you thought were fighters, but they're not so good at fighting. He's a fighter. We hope you will continue to serve your state and your country in the Senate for a very long time to come." And Hatch is like, nah, I got my victory. My donors are happy, so now I can leave and I can go work for them. And they can pay me loads and loads of money since I was one of the ones who just cut their taxes. That's what this is about. So, now what's interesting about this, again, is the Mitt Romney angle, right? So, look, Mitt Romney is not a fan of Trump. Trump is definitely not a fan of Mitt Romney. Now, this makes me laugh because not long after, a lot of criticism came from Mitt Romney. Oh, you're unfit. You're definitely not fit for office. You're unhinged, stuff like that. Not long after that criticism came from Mitt Romney towards Donald Trump, that you had a sort of amends, at least for a short while, which actually led to this hilarious picture that I'm about to show you. God, I love that picture. Go ahead. Tell them your name. Tell them your name. My name is Reek. Oh, that's so sad. That's actually, that is almost as sad as Ted Cruz phone banking for Donald Trump during the election. I don't know which is my favorite picture, to be honest with you. They're just both so sad. So, now, interestingly enough, like I said, with Hatch gone, here comes Mitt Romney. Now, maybe if he wins, and, he might be popular in Utah, there's a big Mormon contingent out there that will definitely vote for him. Maybe he can regain some of his self-respect by being the moral opposition to Donald Trump. And to that I say, moral opposition. No, he's not moral opposition. Here's why. Mitt Romney's still a Republican, right? Now, don't get me wrong. He's probably going to talk shit like Jeff Flake and Bob Corker, right? But on policy, he's going to vote the way that President Trump wants him to. Why? Well, because, again, he's a Republican. They're going to go for Republican policies that will help the rich. For example, on Obamacare, right? Yeah, Obamacare is still a thing. No, Donald Trump did not repeal Obamacare. Yes, he got rid of the individual mandate, and that's going to have a big impact. But the ACA as a whole still exists. Okay? So, and the Republicans, they're not done with that. Now, of course, with the win of Doug Jones, it's going to be a little bit harder to eliminate the ACA than it would have been if Roy Moore had won the special election in Alabama. Well, nonetheless, they're going to try. They're going to at least look at trying and attempting to eliminate the ACA. We'll see what happens after the midterms. And then their big thing, entitlement reform, which basically means cutting your Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, right? He would happily cast a vote with the rest of the Republicans to eliminate Social Security. Why? Because that's in his DNA. As long as Trump puts forward policies that help the rich and corporations, these Republicans like Flake, Corker, and the rest, they will vote for them. Again, let me go back to the tax cuts. Corker and Flake voted for the tax cuts. And so we saw these even so-called moderate Republicans, right, who said, oh, no, I'm not going to vote for something that has such an impact on the deficit. It's not going to blow up the deficit, right? I don't want to vote for something that's going to blow up the deficit that much. What did they do? They still ended up voting for the tax cuts. So, again, it's in their DNA. They're Republicans. They're always going to vote in favor of the corporations, of the rich, and with their donors. Now, as far as Hatch is concerned, again, he's going to go be a lobbyist. He'll be fine, right? Now, the big thing is that, again, he supported Trump. And anybody in Congress that is supporting Trump now very openly is probably not going to do well in the midterm elections. I mean, Roy Moore's loss in Alabama showed us that. I mean, yes, Roy Moore is an extreme example. He's a monster. He was a pedophile and the worst of the worst. And he barely lost by 1.5 points, percentage points. So to Doug Jones, which is your run-of-the-mill centrist Democrat, right? Nonetheless, if a progressive were to run, and there's a lot of progressives that are looking to run in 2018, this is a problem for a lot of Trump-loving Republicans or Trump-supporting Republicans. So Hatch, I'm pretty sure that had something to do with his political calculation, along with the poll numbers that I mentioned before, how unpopular he is in Utah, as well as, of course, the fact that, hey, man, I finally got the tax cuts, so I've done what I'm supposed to do. I've helped the donors. Now I'm out. So, and that's why there's a wave of retirements, right? They did everything that they're supposed to do, and now they're hitting the eject button. They're getting as far away from Donald Trump as they can, and I think that is probably the most important part of this story. Okay. More ridiculous on Donald Trump. Like I said, sidebar game. I'm on it today. Now, earlier this morning, President Trump decided that he wanted to take credit for 2017 being the safest year for commercial air travel. Now, that's interesting. According to Axios, President Trump tied new reports from Dutch consulting firm 270 and the Aviation Safety Network that called 2017 the safest year in commercial aviation history to his quote, strict action in the industry during his first year in office. So I'm going to get to what that means afterwards, right? But here's what he said on Twitter. Since taking office, I've been very strict on commercial aviation. Good news. It was just reported that there was 0 deaths in 2017, the best and safest year on record. And the 2017 has been the best. It's been the safest, best year, tremendous year in air safety. No crashes. Tremendous. Look, that's great and all. I actually celebrate that fact that it's been far safer. Wonderful. And look, like I said, this has to do with commercial airlines, not anything else. There's actually been some deaths when it comes to cargo airplanes and individual airplanes. I actually can't think of the word that they call those. Charter flights, maybe. But as far as commercial airlines, like the big airlines, American, Delta, et cetera, no crashes. Pretty good, right? But what does President Trump have to do with that? What kind of strict action? Well, first, before I get into that, more details, right? It turns out that there has not been a fatal commercial crash since 2009. So, wow, it looks like we've had quite a string of good years. 8 good years in a row, actually. Well, fantastic. How come this is the first time I've heard of it? Well, maybe it has to do with messaging, President. I mean, look, you didn't hear President Obama go out on Twitter and be like, tremendous year, no crashes in 2016. I don't know. But interesting. Excuse me. I told you, man, that cold's still here. So with that in mind, does that mean that that President Obama gets credit for 7 years of tremendous air safety? Maybe. Or maybe the White House doesn't have anything to do with air safety. So what about Trump's strict action on aviation that he's claiming, right? I mean, that's his claim to fame. I did strict action, and that's why 2017 continues the record of being safe, of having the safest year since 2009. Well, a little bit of information on that. Last year, Trump actually wanted to privatize air traffic control nationwide. He actually helped push a Republican bill through Congress to privatize air traffic control. Now, wait a minute here. Now, if the government's doing such a great job, again, since 2009, keeping the airways incredibly safe, right? No fatal crashes in 2009 worldwide, right? Well, then why did he call to privatize it? That's interesting. That's a very, very good question. I would like to see him answer that. And look, again, he's claiming without proof that something he did, which actually didn't even go through because that action got stalled in Congress. Well, he's claiming that somehow his action, which would have been a government action, which would have been a government regulation, actually contributed to this. So there's a lot of different angles that I love about this story. For one, the audacious braggadocio, right? Look at me. What I did, I made airlines safer. MAGA. But he didn't do anything. His actions, his only action on air travel, didn't even go through. So he did literally nothing, and he's taking credit for it. Amazing. Now, the other thing, of course, is saying, well, if he does something through government action, which would mean government regulation, that would make it more safe. Again, that's incredibly ironic because, again, he's a Republican and he hates regulation. But see, this is like the perfect illustration of Trump in action. Taking credit for something he didn't actually do, bragging about it, and then ignoring the actual facts. All facts and logic have gone out the window. It no longer exists in the White House. And you can make an argument that it hasn't existed in the Republican Party for a long time, and maybe that's how that would explain how somebody like like Donald Trump even made it into the party and became president. I don't know. On the one hand, I'm like, dude, get your ass off Twitter. You're an idiot. You're making an ass out of yourself and the United States. And on the other hand, it is actually sort of interesting to watch the mental decline of somebody happen 280 characters at a time. Which one will outweigh the other? Well, that's anybody's guess. Okay. Let's move on. So now 2017 is over. It's 2018 now, and Republicans capped out their year with a gigantic win on taxes, right? And congratulations, Republicans. You just blew a $1.5 trillion hole in the budget in order to give 83% of the gains to the rich. Well, congratulations. Wonderful. But aside from that, what have Republicans actually done? It turns out they've done pretty much nothing other than sit there and watch the person who's supposed to be the leader of the party, President Trump, stick his foot in his mouth over and over again on a daily basis. Now, with those factors in mind, people in the White House are actually really worried about what 2018 is going to bring, because it's actually going to be much harder from here. The first year is actually, traditionally, is when presidents get the most done, right? That's when you can push through your agenda. For example, through the first year of the Obama administration, he pushed through healthcare, the ACA, Obamacare. And, you know, they call it a big achievement. I think it needs a lot of work. And I actually do think it needs to be expanded to a Medicare for all system. But, you know, a lot of people, a lot of Democrats looked at that and was like, mission accomplished. We get universal health care. Wonderful. So now Republicans in their first year, they didn't get rid of the ACA like they promised to do. They didn't do infrastructure. Trump did not get a wall. The only thing they did is cut taxes for the rich using a plan that was incredibly unpopular. So congratulations. Good job. So now, again, like I said, people in the White House, advisors to President Trump, a lot of people, actually, West Wing aides, they're all really worried about what's going to happen next year, especially with midterms coming up. In fact, according to Politico, who talked to a dozen current and former officials and outside advisors, West Wing aides who worked furiously to push through legislation and executive action during President Trump's first year in office expect limited prospects for getting things done in Washington this year, heading into a contentious midterm election. Ari Fleischer, former press secretary to George W. Bush, said, quote, "That absolutely should worry about 2018. I do fear a wave election. Democrats are highly motivated to vote against Trump and old Republicans. Trump has got to grow beyond the base, and he's got to make himself less hated among a group in the middle." Excuse me. You know, I think it's a little late for that. Making him less hated, not going to happen. Why? Because there's no rehabilitation for Trump. Look, he still hates Mexicans and Muslims. He still only cares about the wealthy and himself. He's still doing ridiculous tweets. He has not changed. He has not become more presidential. It's not going to happen. He's not going to get less hated. Okay, we are way, way beyond that. There's no redemption here, right? But Republicans, they're not really focused on that. The problem is, okay, look, we got taxes. Now what do we do next? Politico writes, "There's no leadership from the White House, and now that Roy Moore lost in Alabama, the White House aides and Republicans in Congress said that they have little hope that much, if anything, if any meaningful legislation will reach the president's desk before the midterms." Now, that's actually good news for us and for the country, as most of the legislation that would be pushed by the right would end up being terrible for pretty much everybody who is not rich or a multinational corporation. I mean, let's take infrastructure, right? Now, look, I'm in favor of infrastructure. We desperately need to rebuild our infrastructure in this country. We've got roads and bridges that are falling apart, lead in our water supplies, and it's not just Flint. And there are other reports showing that nearly a quarter of the U.S. population is being served by water systems that violated the Safe Drinking Water Act. Now, what's the Republican response to that? Well, let's just get rid of the Safe Drinking Water Act. Problem solved. Or let's loosen the regulations on that. Let's actually raise the threshold. That'll work. So that's more of that Republican deregulation agenda. Now, Trump's infrastructure plan doesn't do anything about that. What does it do? It's basically, and I've talked about this before, their infrastructure plan is a gift to corporate America. What it would do is it would privatize a lot of roads and bridges and things like that, in which the companies who then have bought into that and will repair it, because, you know, they will fix it up, obviously, after they purchase it from the government, but they'll set up toll roads so that you have to pay to drive on the road now. So what this is that it's more privatizing the gains and socializing the losses. Now, that's the Republican mantra on government, right? So anything coming out of the Republicans in Congress is likely to not be very good or very popular. Here's another case in point. According to Politico, behind the scenes, White House aides and Trump's outside advisors are engaged in a fierce debate over the shape of next year's agenda. At issue, whether to appeal to traditional conservative voters by tackling welfare reform or instead push forward on the president's long-promised infrastructure plan, which could attract Democratic support and win over a broader slice of the electorate. So here's their conundrum. So what do we do? Do a massively corporatized infrastructure plan, or do we cut people's Social Security and Medicare? Decisions. I'm sure they're tearing their hair out trying to figure out which way to go. Several Trump advisors have urged the president to strike a more bipartisan tone next year, encouraging to facilitate a deal with the Democrats on the DACA program for undocumented immigrants and then quickly move to an infrastructure package, a sequence that would significantly delay welfare reform. So what's interesting about that is that President Trump recently came out over this holiday break. He said on DACA, well, I won't do anything on DACA unless there's a wall. Well, that's pretty much stuck in the water then, because we're not going to do anything. And the Democrats, of course, gave up a huge bargaining chip when they actually voted on a budget to keep the government running. They didn't do a government shutdown. They showed again that they were incredibly weak on that issue because look, any government shutdown is going to go back on the Republicans. They're going to look at that and be like, the American people are going to look at that and be like, what the hell? Republicans, that's your fault. And there's polling to back that up. And the Democrats, they literally took defeat out of the jaws of victory. What are we going to do with this Democratic Party? Again, they don't know how to fight. They're not good at fighting. So now they let the Republicans get away with whatever they're going to get away with. And now Trump is, of course, demanding a wall in return for helping DACA recipients. Well, again, a very, very popular issue, very popular stance of letting people who are DACA recipients stay in the United States. Again, it wasn't their fault that they were brought here before they were actually, while they were children, right? It's not their fault. And again, even Republicans are like, yes, let them stay. That's fine. Why are we going to kick them all out? That's ridiculous. So again, it's a super popular thing. The Democrats threw that away, and now Trump's demanding something ridiculous in exchange. So we'll see how that turns out. Now, the advisors have also told the president that passing infrastructure could help Republicans hold the House, pointing to polling that shows the issue is popular with the public. Again, infrastructure is popular, and if done right, will actually create jobs and help with economic growth. However, they're not going to do it right. Some of the president's outside advisors say that that's the right approach. Newt Gingrich said, quote, infrastructure first. I wouldn't touch entitlements. There's zero reason to pick a fight on any of those in an election year. So it's not that they're not coming for your entitlements. Oh, no. They want to come for your entitlements. They feel that they're entitled to your entitlements. Which, by the way, we call it entitlements because that's money you paid into, and you're entitled to it. Anyway, so here's Newt Gingrich saying, no, don't even do it. Don't do it. Right? Do infrastructure. Do something that's popular. Well, again, if they did it right, I would be in support. I would actually give Trump and the Republicans credit for actually doing infrastructure. Again, if you do it the right way. But we've already seen their infrastructure plan, which wouldn't actually fix areas, for example, impacted by lead in the water, by pipes that have corroded. It wouldn't help rural America. Ironically, it would not help the people that propelled Trump to victory. No, what it would do is these corporations, once they have access to the roads, once they've privatized these roads, do you think they're going to go in the road in the middle of Iowa where there's 1,200 people in a town? Okay, we're going to fix that road, and then we're going to set up a toll. You think that's going to be cost effective? No, these are giant multinational corporations that are going to buy up these roads. And where are they going to set it? They're going to set it where most of the people are. Again, you're going to have bigger cities, main highways. These are going to be your toll roads, and these are going to be the only roads that the companies are actually going to pay attention to, that are actually going to get fixed. While roads in Montana and rural Iowa, like I said, or in Alabama, they're not going to get any attention, and they're going to fall apart. So they don't even know what they're voting for, okay? The people in those areas when they vote for Republicans. But again, under this plan, the places that need it most, they're not going to see that infrastructure. Now, aside from infrastructure, they talk about welfare reform, which again means gigantic cuts in the welfare system. Now, Paul Ryan, he's determined to gut your Social Security and Medicare. Now, Mitch McConnell, turns out he's not as interested in doing so. Now, it's not because he doesn't actually want to cut it, but like Newt Gingrich, I don't want to sit there and fight on it if it's an election year. Midterms are coming, and that's when more voters start to pay attention, especially Republican voters, which it turns out Medicare is incredibly popular also among Republicans. Yes, it's popular among independents and Democrats and Republicans. It's a popular program. It's the most popular program in America. Social Security, but the same thing. Incredibly popular. Even Medicaid is popular across all parties. You're going to touch that in election year? You better be prepared to lose your ass off. That's what's going to happen. So Newt Gingrich, Mitch McConnell, they're like, we're not going to do this fight. Paul Ryan's like, no, you don't understand. I've been dreaming of this since I was since I was at the kegger when I was young. When I was taking all that Social Security money from my dead parents, from my dead father, and paying for college, I was dreaming about taking that ladder and kicking it out from to prevent anybody from ever climbing that ladder ever again. I'm the last one. I'm going to kick the ladder out. If anybody embodies the word deplorable, it would be Paul Ryan. Horrible person. But anyway, now, there are other things they might be working on in 2018. For example, trade. And more specifically, probably starting a trade war with other countries. According to one White House aide, the administration is weighing trade measures on everything from steel to solar imports, stoking deep concern among Trump's free market advisors that the president could spark a trade war. Now, look, I do think that we need to do some things to address our trade imbalance. Maybe by, making more stuff here. But see, we're not going to do that if all the corporations are going overseas in order to exploit cheap labor. That's one of the big problems. So, maybe we should consider putting some tariffs on companies that go overseas just to send their shit back to America. Because I think that, if their companies stay here, they can actually provide good paying jobs. So, hey, like, Nike, if you're going to go over there and make shoes, the same shoes that you're charging $75 to $85 for, or possibly more, that's how much it was to get Air Jordans when I was growing up. $75, $85. That's why I never had those. They go over there and they make those shoes for like $5, and they mark them up. Well, they can make those shoes in the United States. So why don't you tariff them the difference? Tariff the company, not the government. So the company says, okay, well, look, it's going to be actually cheaper or just the same to go and make shoes in America. Okay. And hey, look, it's good PR. We can stamp made in America. Maybe that'll actually help our sales. Who knows, right? But that's something that I would want to do anyway. But just going willy-nilly without thinking of the consequences of trade deals is actually not the way to go. Because you actually have to think of the consequences, right? But if you think the Trump administration is going to care, no, absolutely not. Because he's clueless and he's surrounded by clueless people. Right now, anybody who has a brain has either quit or have been fired by this administration. So there's actually little hope that they're not going to fuck something up and actually hurt American trade. So they're not looking forward to that discussion either. And of course, finally, there is a Russian investigation, which is likely to last throughout 2018. On that, Politico notes that White House lawyers have essentially been lying to the president. Quote, while the White House's lawyers, led by Beltway powerhouse Ty Cobb, have been assuring Trump that Mueller's probe into Russian meddling in the election is likely to conclude in the coming weeks, most of the president's senior aides not only dismiss that as fantasy, but expect the special counsel's investigation to ramp up in the coming year. For Trump's closest aides, that means weeks and potentially months of the president's dark moods, which his lawyers have sought to alleviate in part by assuring him the investigation is nearing its conclusion, first by Thanksgiving and then by year's end. It's a strategy that one White House aide predicted the president is likely to pick up on. So here you have a situation where White House lawyers are literally lying to the president because the president is too stupid to pick up on Lies. No, Donald, don't fire Mueller, because he'll be done in a couple weeks and he will find you completely 100% innocent of anything that you did. So whatever you do, don't fire Mueller, because it's going to end soon. It's going to end soon. That's the strategy they're employing. Now, Trump's an idiot, and he's like, fire Mueller, fire Mueller, fire Mueller. But he hasn't yet, because he is convinced that this is going to end soon. Oh, no. Oh, no. And again, they know Trump. They know. These are people that have been Trump's personal lawyers for a long time. Ty Cobb has worked for Trump for decades. They know that if he knew the truth, that he would immediately fire Mueller, which would be the ultimate admission of guilt, and would launch us into a constitutional crisis, the likes of which I have never seen before. Here you could have a president that is acting above the law. So they lied to him because they know that Trump, in his infinite stupidity, would make it much, much worse. So that's just some of the stuff that they have to look forward to in this coming year. So to all the Republicans that are now continuing to openly back Trump, it's not looking good for you guys. There is a good chance that you might, in the midterms, reap what you sow, which I think for America would end up being a pretty good thing. Okay. Moving on. Now, Paul Ryan has a strange fixation on killing the social safety net. Even back in his college days, when he used to hang out with his bros, slam beers, and dream about stepping on poor people. Now, with the passage of Trump's tax cuts, which, of course, blow a $1.5 trillion hole in the budget, Paul Ryan is now laying the groundwork for being able to achieve that dream. Now, earlier this month, Washington Post quoted Ryan as, quote, ready to cut entitlements. During an interview on Ross Kaminsky's talk radio show, he said, quote, we're going to have to get back next year at entitlement reform, which is how you tackle the debt and deficit. Healthcare entitlements such as Medicare and Medicaid are the big drivers of the debt, so we spend more time on the healthcare entitlements because that's really where the problem lies, fiscally speaking. No. The problem lies with you and your party. You guys just passed a tax bill whose benefits, 83% of the benefits go to the top 1%. And again, giant hole in the deficit. And now, this year, you're looking at increasing spending to the military by 7%. You're going to add billions more to the defense budget that we don't actually need. Look, healthcare didn't do that. Medicare didn't do that. You guys did that. You blew up the budget. But see, of course, that's their game, right? Run up gigantic deficits when you're in charge. And when Democrats get in charge, suddenly austerity. They scream for austerity. And of course, the centrist Democrats are like, oh yes, we must cut entitlements. We must cut all these things. We have to. We don't have a choice. We're going broke. It's like we have two corporate right-wing parties in America. I know, strange. But yeah, when Democrats are in power, suddenly deficits matter. But now, Republicans say, deficits, they don't matter. We're just going to run it up. This is old politics, right? All this is an effort to serve the donors who love these giant tax cuts. Now, what's interesting here is while Paul Ryan is now pushing for these tax cuts, not all Republicans are saying that they're on board. This is very interesting. According to the Washington Post, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has all but ruled out the idea, saying publicly that he doesn't expect to see welfare and entitlement changes on the agenda next year, particularly if it's done in a party-line manner. He said, quote, the sensitivity in entitlements is such that you almost have to have bipartisan agreement in order to achieve a result. Now, interestingly enough, back when during the Obama administration, during some of the debt ceiling fights, President Obama and some of the corporate Democrats, they actually did consider doing a cut to Social Security. They were considering doing a changed CPI, which would have been an effective cut in the growth of Social Security benefits over the years. It would actually have less generous benefit raises every year, which the benefit raises of Social Security right now are actually incredibly modest. So it's not that much. And again, Social Security doesn't even add to the deficit at all whatsoever. But of course, they don't care about that. They want to continue to lie about Social Security and Medicare and saying, oh, no, it contributes to the debt and the deficit. It does not. Now, you might think on McConnell, his statements, you think, oh, God, thank God we're safe, right? Now, notice he hasn't said that he's against cutting it. He's just saying that, for one, it's got to be bipartisan, so you're going to get some corporate Democrats on your side, and also it's not going to be during the 2018 midterms, because to do so would be political suicide. Now, again, there are corporate Democrats that are thinking about supporting these cuts, but again, it is actually politically risky, as the Post goes on to explain. Other key Republicans are clearly loath to turn to such a sharply partisan pursuit after grueling fights over Obamacare and taxes. For example, Shelley Moore Capito, a swing vote during the Obamacare repeal fight this summer, quickly changed the subject when asked about Ryan's entitlement reform push. Quote, well, I'd like to see us pivot to infrastructure. We've talked about it all year. The president talked about it. I think it could be a bipartisan exercise. I would certainly hope so. The clash illustrates the dilemma that congressional GOP leaders face early next year. How to sketch out an election year agenda that unifies House and Senate Republicans and satisfies the conservative base without further risking their already imperiled majorities. Now, why would entitlement reform be a problem with Republicans? I mean, their views are monstrous, right? No, actually, a lot of Republicans love entitlements, as long as they're getting them. Let's take Medicaid, for example. 74% of Americans, according to a Kaiser Family Foundation poll, actually have a very positive view of Medicaid. Now, that includes 61% of Republicans. Now, it's not going to be a surprise that a lot of the people who are on Medicaid are poor white people living in rural areas that receive Medicaid. So, of course, they're going to be in favor of that program. 59% of Republicans think Medicaid works well in their own states. 54% of Republicans say do not touch Medicaid spending. And the rest are evenly split between increasing spending and decreasing spending, both 22% respectively. So Republicans are going to have a pretty hard time justifying cuts to Medicaid as Republican politicians. Medicare, also incredibly popular, more so even than Medicaid. And in total, Medicare spending took up 15% of total spending in 2016 and is projected to only rise to about 17.5% by 2027. That is, of course, related to a lot of the boomers retiring who vote primarily for Republicans. So that's why you see Republicans out there saying, do not touch my Medicare. Get your government, your grubby government hands off my Medicare, which always makes me laugh. Because it's a government program. But anyway, now, I know Republican politicians are they're going to look and they're going to lie, basically, look you straight in the eye and tell you, no, you don't understand. We can't afford it anymore. Look at all the money we spend on Medicare. We can't afford it, right? We're going to have to cut it. And here's McConnell saying, wait a minute, hold on. We've got an election coming. We cannot cut this incredibly popular program. Let's take it easy. Let's take it easy. Now, again, I'm not saying Mitch McConnell is suddenly a defender of Medicare, but right now he is the consummate establishment politician, and the establishment right now is highly in favor of Medicare, Social Security. Why? It's because most Americans are in favor of Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. And if you go against that, you are likely to not win your election. Those are the sacred cows, and you cannot touch those cows. So everything is carefully weighted in the politics and how it will affect control of the chamber and re-election. That's what Mitch McConnell's thinking about. He's got to weigh that with the desires of their donors, which is basically to cut taxes. And he's already done that. We already passed those gigantic tax cuts, so the donors don't really care what they're going to do with Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. Now, this is important here because, as the Post explains, they no longer have the numbers to do this. With Democratic opposition to welfare and entitlement changes all but certain, Republicans would have to use powerful reconciliation procedures that can evade a Senate filibuster. But that would require nearly complete unity among Republicans on a joint House-Senate budget and on what controversial policy modifications to make. John Cornyn said, quote, "All you have to do is the math. Unless it's bipartisan, then you're talking about reconciliation, which means you have to pass a budget, you have to get reconciliation instructions, and you have to get 51 Republicans all to vote for it. That is a pretty steep hill to climb." Now, this is much different than what they did to get taxes done, right? Every Republican was going to vote to cut taxes for their donors, right? That's what the Republican Party does. They serve their donors. That's why they exist. Their sole reason for existence is to serve the donors, is to cut their taxes, okay? Now, cutting Medicare, that is actually going to be probably a lot worse than the fight over the ACA. It's actually a much harder sell. Now, you've got the Freedom Caucus out there, which pretty much hates Medicare and Medicaid and everything that actually helps regular working people, saying, absolutely, let's cut it. We're on board. I hate those freeloaders that paid into the system. I want their money, and I want old people to eat cat food. I don't care. Ryan's conference bellowed when Congress temporarily raised the debt ceiling in September without any corresponding spending cuts, and conservatives have been pressing Ryan ever since to call up legislation to reduce the biggest drivers of the national debt, which they falsely attribute to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. In order to win votes for the budget in late October that paved the way for the tax overhaul, Paul Ryan promised leaders of the Republican Study Committee to vote sometime next year on deficit reduction legislation, which would include cutting entitlements. Republicans since then have discussed enacting work requirements for food stamps and other programs for the poor, as well as Medicare changes to curb spending. Paul Ryan said on CBS This Morning recently, "We have to address entitlements, otherwise we can't really get a handle on our future debt." He also singled out programs for low-income people, saying, quote, "We right now are trapping people in poverty, and it's basically trapping people on welfare programs, which prevents them from hitting their potential and getting them into the workforce." So Paul Ryan, unsurprisingly, he is one of those monsters that wants to eliminate these programs. But there are enough Republicans, I think, just like in the ACA fight, that actually will not go for cutting Medicare, at least for now. Again, super popular. Even Mike Huckabee and Donald Trump argued over who came up with the promise to not cut Medicare and Social Security first. Now, that said, do you think Trump actually gives a shit about Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security? No, of course not. He actually doesn't really care about those programs. He's never going to deal with those programs. And he's not going to be worried about people on those programs unless they vote for him, unless he gets something out of it. So, but nonetheless, there are a lot of congressional Republicans that are worried about these programs because they actually want to get reelected. In fact, even some of Ryan's rank and file are wary of tackling entitlements. Hillary Clinton cared about 24 GOP-held swing districts back in 2016, and with evidence of a Democratic wave already building political rights, centrist Republicans fear cuts to programs that support the most vulnerable could cost them their seats. When asked about entitlement reform, several House GOP moderates responded that they would prefer to tackle infrastructure, as did Collins in the Senate. Now, before you think you're safe, let me add this. The votes likely are there in the House to pass cuts or changes to food stamps, disability, and even Medicare and Social Security, and Ryan could try to move entitlement reform through the House to exert pressure on the Senate to take up the issue. Ryan could also get the support of President Trump, who has no moral fiber at all and does not actually care. There are GOP senators who are fine or even excited about taking up an overhaul of welfare programs. One is Senator Orrin Hatch, who actually will be retiring at the end of the year. Now, he's not only did Hatch say that he would be fine with cutting entitlements, Jeff Flake also retiring at the end of the year, saying, or at the end of his term, sorry, saying, quote, "I'd love it. That's a heavy lift, particularly after the tax bill, but we know we've got to rein in these programs in order to make them sustainable." So, look, all of this, I don't quite know what to make of it, other than maybe you should be nervous, since there might not be enough moderates left by the time that they actually take on these so-called entitlements. So like it or not, win or not, they're still coming for your Social Security. And if we don't fight back by actually electing real progressives to defend it, then they're actually going to get it. Okay, I'm going to take a really quick break here. We've got a couple more stories left for you guys. So stay right here. We'll be right back. Back and around the nation, right here, TYT Nation. A couple more stories for you guys today. But before I get into that, please make sure to give us a like and a share if you haven't already. And I noticed over 200 live viewers today. So that's pretty awesome. So thanks to all of you for watching on YouTube. And of course, thanks to our Facebook audience as well, which need a little work to get out there on Facebook yet. But thank you for those of you tuning in. All right. Let's go to our next story. Now, minimum wage is still embarrassingly low for a country that is supposedly as wealthy as ours. But what we know right now is that the wealth is concentrated to the top 1%. Now, the last raise, it turns out, for the minimum wage was back in 2009. Now, I actually remember that because that's back when I was working at a grocery store, stocking in the back. Now, I had hired in at somewhere around $5 an hour. Wow. Now, that was actually the previous federal minimum wage, and of course, I saw my wage finally go up to $7.25. Wow. And at the time, I was like, hey, maybe I can actually afford to pay my car insurance and eat this month. Awesome. So that's how bad our minimum wage has traditionally been. So again, we have not had a raise since then. And turns out, adjusted for inflation, the wage in 1968 would actually be equal to $11 an hour. So not only are we behind, but we're embarrassingly behind where we were back in 1968. So that is a disaster. Now, that's, of course, because we don't index the wage for inflation, so it has ended up losing a lot of its value. So, in plain terms, people are still working as hard, if not harder, for actually less money. Now, that's actually far less than even others in other wealthy countries. Now, among the world's wealthiest nations, the U.S. has the lowest national minimum wage relative to the median wage. Now, of any of the wealthy nations represented in the OECD. Now, let me give you some examples here. France, right? Now, the national minimum wage, close to about 1,500 euros a month, is equal to about 61% of the median national wage. In Australia, it's about 54%. In Canada, it's 46%. In the United States, the federal minimum wage works out to just 35% of the national median wage, which is the lowest in the OECD. So, congratulations, America. We're actually doing worse than everybody else. So, when we compare ourselves, for example, to other nations, well, it turns out our workers get paid less. We have less benefits, and there are less safety nets when something inevitably happens. For example, we get sick and we don't have health insurance to take care of it, and we get massively ill. Well, you can't take time off. You got to work. There's no paid time off. There's very little sick time, and that is, of course, unpaid. And, of course, a lot of people, especially working for minimum wage, don't have access to health insurance. So they can't afford that health insurance. That's why we need, of course, a lot of changes to our system. But it just shows you how backwards we are compared to these other nations. Again, you look at these countries in Europe, OECD countries, wealthier nations, and they usually have some form of universal health care, truly universal health care, that is normally single payer or heavily government subsidized, not-for-profit. For example, in, I believe, Switzerland runs a not-for-profit healthcare system based on private insurance. But since it's not-for-profit, they don't have for-profit industries. Insurance companies basically using you and your illness or lack of illness as a cash cow. We're the only country that does that. And, of course, that's why we pay twice more for health insurance, health coverage, than we do in the UK, for example. So we've got all these policies that are actually very anti-worker here in the United States, and it's reflected, and minimum wages is part of that, but it's reflected in the rankings that we have with the OECD countries. So now, France, I love the example of France, right? Because they have one of the highest, 61% of median national wage, right? That's because in France, if you threaten to lower their wages or you threaten to take away their benefits, they are literally out in the street protesting. They will shut that shit down. In America, we wouldn't even dare dream of doing it. We do not have strong unions, and we don't take to the streets to protect our benefits, our wages and our benefits. We let corporations walk all over us because we've been told to shut up and know our place. Case in point, there's an argument against the minimum wage, right? And it's been peddled a lot by conservative sources, conservative sites, and people who are basically paid industry shills, right? From the restaurant associations that are like, well, if we raise the minimum wage to, for example, living wage, then you're going to have to pay for a $12 hamburger. No, first off, nobody's going to buy a $12 hamburger. That's ridiculous. They would actually, a lot of people would decide, okay, I'm just not going to eat out anymore. They would either be forced to lower their prices, or do something else to try to figure things out. Now, these companies would have to be more competitive on their prices, right? They do, if they actually want business. Meanwhile, why they will send some of that cost onto you. They'll pass it on to you. There's only so much they can realistically pass on to you before people actually stop buying for them. And with the corporation sitting on plenty of money, they will end up absorbing some of that cost, or most of that cost. So basically what that means is not $12 hamburgers, but maybe an extra quarter or 50 cents. Now, if I have to pay an extra quarter or 50 cents for a hamburger to make sure that people that I buy the sandwich from that are working there can afford to actually live, well, I'm actually fine with that. And I suspect that there's a lot of people who will be fine with that. That actually saves me money as a taxpayer when you think about it, because those people working at McDonald's or wherever, they're not going to have to get on food stamps later on. And so, secondly, part of that argument is, okay, well, look, since now labor costs so much, well, these companies, they're going to pull back in their labor. There's going to be less employment. They're actually going to give people less hours. Well, turns out that's not entirely the truth. A massive 2014 review of over 200 minimum wage studies concluded that moderate increases in the minimum wage are both a useful means of raising wages in the lower part of the wage distribution, and that it has little to no effect on employment and hours. So think about that, all right? So again, their main argument, $12 hamburgers, not feasible, not realistic, as they still have to have competitive prices and reductions in employment and hours, which again has been shown not to be true. Now, I believe that we should go for a living wage of $15 an hour. Now, there are studies that say, well, hold on, we don't know the impacts of what raising the wage so drastically will actually do. But there are places that we can look at, and one of them is Washington in the SeaTac area. Now, they raised their minimum wage to a living wage, and in so doing, they have seen a boon in the hotel industry. Now, that actually employs a lot of people working at minimum wage. Now, there's more investment, and a lot of the people the Huffington Post actually talked to said, and these are CEOs, right, of these hotel chains. They're like, yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of a consideration, but it wasn't our main consideration. Our main consideration is, what's business going to be like? Are there going to be customers? Is this a place where people are going to want to stay and spend their money? It's not so much wages, it's how much business they're actually going to make. And that's actually one of the biggest factors. It's not wages, it's not even taxes that are the main considerations of a company. It's, are they going to have enough business to overcome those and actually make a profit? In the case of SeaTac, they actually are seeing that. They are seeing business. They are doing investment in that area despite these high wages. So, now, there are also competing studies, to be fair, that have not undergone peer review that are opposite. One says, oh, things are getting worse. There's actually been a small reduction of employment. And there's another study that says the opposite. Now, we'll see which one is actually correct when they actually do peer review. But nonetheless, regardless on how fast you bring those wages up, wages definitely have to go up. There's no reason that in an incredibly wealthy nation that we still have people working for starvation wages for $7.25. You can't live on that. I mean, the people that are working and making $7.25 an hour, they can afford to take care of themselves working at a job. Now, I believe that you should be able to. It doesn't matter what job it is, whether it's taking out the, being a garbage man or flipping burgers. A job is a job, and it should make you at least enough to survive on without needing to turn to the government for assistance. Because being on government assistance kind of defeats the entire purpose of working at a job. And actually is a handout to the company. Because they know, well, that government assistance is there for people who are in poverty, and we're not required to pay a living wage, so we're just going to make all this money off the backs of the taxpayer. And we're going to give that money straight to the top. It is privatizing the gains and socializing the losses. That's what we've been doing, and that's what the minimum wage fight should be about. Or at least partly should be about. The other part should be making sure that people who work for a living actually can be able to live. There's no reason we should be subsidizing these wealthy corporations. So, again, if that's not a big enough reason to raise the minimum wage, then, well, there are plenty of other reasons out there. But we've got to get to it. We've got to go to a living wage so people can actually be able to afford to live. Okay. One more thing. By thing, I mean story. She's back. Everybody's favorite fundamentalist, Michelle Bachmann, might be making a return to politics. Now, longtime viewers of the show, you guys know who she is. She's an insane fundamentalist who has said lots and lots of crazy things over the years. Now, some of you who might be new to the show, who haven't actually seen this, since she did, she retired several years ago, so she hasn't exactly been in the news. She used to represent Minnesota in the House. She was a sitting congresswoman. Well, now she's considering to getting back into politics and actually running for Minnesota Senator Al Franken's seat, who recently resigned due to sexual harassment allegations. Now, Bachmann talked about this while she was on Doomsday Prepper show and fundamentalist Jim Bakker's program. Let's take a look at that.
Now in Minnesota, Al Franken, as you know, has resigned. I'm from Minnesota. I've had people contact me and urge me to run for that Senate seat. And the only reason I would run is for the ability to take these principles into the United States Senate and to be able to advocate for these principles. Yeah. The question is should it be me? Should it be now? But there's also a cost. There's a price you pay. Sure. And the price is bigger than ever because the swamp is so toxic. It has never been. And my husband and I aren't money people. Right. That's the thing. We're not. We're normal.
I don't know about that. Normal? Hold on. Not so normal. Look, Marcus Bachmann, right? If you've seen this guy seems like he's so far into the closet that he's actually in Narnia. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but seriously, far from normal. And again, Michelle, there's a long train of crazy that comes out every time she opens her mouth. So, now as far as the swamp goes, she's right about that. But wait, I thought Trump was actually supposed to drain the swamp. No. It's even more toxic than it was before. Well, on that we can agree. But there's more. Now she gets into why she thinks she might be called to run. Watch.
So, I mean, we're trying to be wise. Should we do this? Shouldn't we do this? What? I mean, I trust in a big God. Yeah. And so he got us over all those finish lines, but I also believed I was supposed to run for president. Not that I didn't even run because I thought I was going to win. I ran to put the whole issue of Obamacare front and center before the American people. I feel like I was wildly successful because by the time I left the presidential race, all 7 men on the stage were forced to take my position of repeal. Not one of them had taken that position. And the Republican Party platform had to change to reflect my position. Oh. And the American people took the position that Obamacare is bad. And so that moved the debate. I think I was wildly successful. Yes. I didn't win, but moved the debate. So I didn't shed a tear when I left the contest because I felt like, I fulfilled the calling that God gave me. So the question is, am I being called to do this now? I don't know. No. Okay. So there's obviously a lot to break down here. This is somebody who literally believes that God put her in the race so that she could help take health care away from
millions of Americans. That's what they believe in. Oh, well, you got to understand that's biblical values. Actually, no. Have you actually even read that book? I know there's a couple of places that you love to go. For example, you really love to read that Leviticus, but you haven't apparently read anything else. No. So, and again, as far as being wildly successful, no, you're actually super not successful. And think about this, right? Obamacare is actually more popular now than before. I mean, now that this is a Republican, the mainstream Republican position is get rid of the ACA, get rid of the ACA, right? That she says that, okay, well, that's partly thanks to me. And again, it's now more popular since they tried to get rid of it. Furthermore, even Republicans are now warming to the idea of expanding Medicare to everyone, which would actually be more aligned with biblical principles. For example, Jesus didn't charge no copay. He didn't ask for no insurance. Okay? But look, we all know that conservative evangelicals are, for the most part, not biblical people. They only go to the Bible when they want to figure out who they're supposed to hate. Should I hate the gays and the Muslims and the atheists, or should I just hate the gays? Because Muslims at least believe in God, or a God. So should I just hate the atheists and the gays? I don't know. They go to the Bible and they look for that, right? Now, they actually ignore that there are things in the Bible that are actually encouraged. For example, abortion, right? Now, Michelle Bachmann's like, oh, I'm so anti-abortion. Got to save the babies, right? Got to save the babies. Got to protect the babies from abortion. No abortions whatsoever, right? No control over my own body. No. I want someone else to control my body. I want Marcus to control my body. Okay, well, look, man, if you want to do that on your own, that's fine, but that shouldn't be a policy position for everyone else. But on abortion, when it comes to the Bible, you know that abortion is actually encouraged by the Bible. It says that you should make your wife drink bitter water if you believe that she is cheating on you. And that if she miscarries after she drinks that water, well, then she's a cheating, lying bitch. If not, well, then she's been faithful to you. That's what the Bible says. The bitter water causes an abortion. And in that context, God's totally cool with that. Now, there are other areas, of course, as well, along with abortion, that evangelicals are not with the Bible on. Immigration, for example. God says to treat immigrants as if they're parts of your family. They certainly do not do that. So, now, but what's more striking than the inconsistencies with their own supposed beliefs is that we're actually having an argument about what we should take from a 2,000-year-old book to Washington. That should not be a discussion that we should be having. It should not be a thing. Biblical values, if you want to live them in your own personal life, that's 100% fine with you, fine with me, all right? You can do whatever you want. Which, look, you couldn't actually live a 100% biblical life because you would likely get arrested because there's some crazy shit in the Bible. But if you want to live, you know, pro-life in your own life and never get an abortion and all that, be submissive to your husband, I don't give a shit. Do whatever you want. It's when you actually get into office and try to spread that around and force other people to live the way that you want to live. That's the problem that I have. So, but anyway, Bachmann literally believes that God wanted her to run so that she could try and take away healthcare and then lose. And now she's thinking, well, what if God wants me to run again? And this time for Al Franken's seat. It's literal insanity. But as I'm going to point out, what Baker says later, afterwards, is actually even more insane. Because remember, she is on the show with Jim Baker, who's this end times guy. He's selling food buckets to people, literally thinks that the world is going to end in his lifetime. And he actually said this, quote, right now, they want to kill the president of the United States. And if they could put a contract out, which they probably already have, they would do so. So this is the people that Michelle Bachmann surrounds herself with. and speaks to regularly, they live in an alternative reality, man. It is not our own. What are you going to do? Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Went a little long, but that's cool. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Make sure, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our channel. We get new clips 5 days a week, so long as I'm not sick. Actually, my cough behaved itself today, so that's good news. But anyway, if you haven't already, please give us a like. If you haven't, like on Facebook, like on YouTube. We'll have, like I said, clips going up on both platforms later on tonight, so make sure to like those, share those around with your friends, and get them to subscribe. 2018, I want to hit 100,000 subscribers. We are at 66,000, so we have got a long way to go, and we need your help. So 100,000 subscribers by the end of 2018. That is my New Year's resolution, so help make it happen. Please give us a share, and please subscribe. All right. Thanks, everybody. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you all tomorrow.